Jai Meher Baba. My name is Naosherwan Anzar. I met Meher Baba when I was 2 months old. Meher Baba used to visit the north of India in a small town called Dehradun, which is at the foothills of the Himalayas. My father and my mother both were followers of Meher Baba. My father heard about Meher Baba in 1930 when somebody handed him a book called The Sayings of Meher Baba. For 12 years, he never had an opportunity of meeting Meher Baba. 12 years later, when Meher Baba came to Dehradun, my father and a friend of his, my father's name was Keki Narawala, and a friend of his whose name was Keki Desai, both had the same first name. They were asked to organize a house for Meher Baba and the Mandli ahead of Meher Baba's coming. So they were given specific instructions on how to go about finding a house for Meher Baba. Now, why was Meher Baba and his Mandli coming to Dehradun? Meher Baba traveled extensively throughout India and across also all over the world. But his prime reason of coming to the northern part of India, which is primarily Dehradun, Rishikesh, Hardwar, Motichur, and places like that, was because he did extensive work with the musts, the mad, and those who needed his help to put them on a spiritual path. So Meher Baba would come, and very often people wonder, how is it that Meher Baba knew that there were some musts or some mad or some other itinerant monks or yogis or mahatmas who needed a spiritual push were in that certain area? So what Baba would do is he would send a questionnaire ahead of time. And in this case, he sent a questionnaire to my father. And some of the questions were, are there any fairs, religious fairs and festivals being held in that area? Are there any itinerant monks, or are there any Mahatmas, yogis, swamis? Is there a religious place of pilgrimage? Are there temples, mosques, churches in that particular area? So there was always a questionnaire that preceded Meher Baba's arrival to a particular area. So on this occasion also, Meher Baba sent these instructions, but they also had to find a house for Baba. And after they found a house for Baba, my Erich's father, Papa Jasawala, who came with Baba and who had met my father earlier, my father begged and pleaded with him to allow a darshan with Meher Baba. Because on the earlier instances when Meher Baba came, Meher Baba had turned down a request for a darshan. Darshan means face-to-face with the master. That's what the meaning of darshan is. To be in the presence of the master is what darshan means. So, Papa Jasawala told Baba that there were these two Parsi men who had worked a lot for him before his arrival, and that they were longing and yearning for his darshan. So Baba said that I will only give them a few seconds and no questions, just look at me, and then they have to move away. They have to leave. So it was arranged that Baba would appear in the doorway, and Papa Jasawala opened the curtain. Baba was in front. Both my father and Keki Desai bowed down, and Baba did bless them, and they were sent off. But that was enough for my father to see Meher Baba as the same ancient one. He always loved Zoroaster very much. He was always in love with Zoroaster. And he believed that he would see Zoroaster in this lifetime. And when he saw Meher Baba, he recognized Meher Baba as Zoroaster. So his mission literally started from that point onwards. He was completely hooked. He was madly in love with Meher Baba. So then from that point onwards, um, my father became a devotee, and every time that Baba came, he would work for Baba and follow his instructions. In 1950, during the new life, Baba came to Dehradun and he stayed opposite our house. Our house was 36 Lytton Road and Meher Baba's house was 39 Lytton Road. And that was the time that I came very close to Meher Baba. But let me backtrack a little bit. I was about 5 years old, just a little over 4 and about 5, when I got a severe skin ailment. And my father and mother were very worried, concerned, and they went from one doctor to another doctor, and they all kind of couldn't figure out what it was. It was eczema or whether it was a skin ailment, but it seemed like it was a life-threatening ailment. So my father and mother were naturally very, very worried about the survival of their little child. So during this period, Baba used to travel to Motichur and Haridwar for his mast work. So, and the women mandali would be staying at Dehradun. And Gohar was the one, like the intermediary, and she would suggest, why don't you try out this and go to this doctor or whatever. But she also didn't have any of those answers, as most doctors would. So Baba then happened to stop by, and Gohar mentioned to Baba that the Narawala's child, Naosherwan, had this terrible skin ailment. So Baba came to our house and looked at me and told my father and mother, would you do something if I asked you to do? And they had already decided that they would obey Baba. They had reached a stage in their discipleship when they said that they would accept what Meher Baba said. And both my father and mother said yes. But my Meher Baba was aiming more at my mother. So he turns to my mother again, will you follow what I ask you to do? Meher Baba always asked 3 times. And then my mother said, yes, Baba. And she said, are you absolutely sure? Before I tell you what is to be done. And both my father and mother said, yes, Baba. So my Baba said, take a brush, take a regular brush, and brush the baby's body vigorously till it bled profusely. And then all the various different the cloths, the counterpane and the pillow and the pillows and even the bedding that was there had to be burnt immediately. So my aunt, who was with me, and she was made of stronger, sterner stuff, she undertook the assignment of really scrubbing me, and I was screaming. And my father all along felt that there wasn't a chance for me to survive this whole process. So I went off to, after this was done, I went off to sleep, and my father would come on the hour and put his hand to see if I was breathing, because I was in deep, deep sleep, and all the cloth had been burnt, but I survived to narrate this story. So what is important in this story is the aspect of obedience. Meher Baba wanted complete obedience, because that is the only way that he could express his or channel his what he wanted to convey to those individuals by complete obedience. and my parents learned their first lesson in obedience. Then when Meher Baba came in New Life, our house was the secretariat of the New Life. And Baba would stay in those days it was named Majri Mafi, which was a land that had been arranged by Kumar and his family. Amrit is Kumar's daughter. So that was arranged by them as well, including my father. My father was in touch with Kumar. So the story of Kumar is that he was an atheist and he didn't believe in God. So the story goes that he was also, which today you would call a terrorist, but he was a revolutionary against the British government. So he was arrested very often, and once he was arrested for a longer period. So he was very tired in prison, and he called out to God and addressed him as Mr. God. He said, Mr. God, if you are truly real, release me. The next morning, he challenged God, and for some odd reason, he was released the next morning. But many years later, when my father and Keki Desai went to him that we are looking for a land for a spiritual master, he laughed at them. He says, there are no spiritual masters because there is no God, and I don't know what you're talking about, but I'll help you all the same. My father gave him a copy of The Perfect Master to soften him up and to help him understand what he was trying to do. And then when Baba came, Baba took him aside and he told him, do you remember when you were in prison and you called out to me? And the next day you were released? And the man was floored. He was stunned because he had never mentioned this to anybody. And from that point onwards, he was a devoted disciple. So that's the way the master works in different ways. So then when Baba, I became very close to Baba because my father and mother were not allowed to walk in and out because Baba and the women mandali were staying across the house, but I was allowed. I was a little child, so I would go. I was 7 years old. I would go in and out. So one day, and now I'm not narrating the story, but Mani Irani, Meher Baba's sister, is narrating the story on a video, on one of the videos that she recorded it. And she says that we were staying opposite the home of the Narawala family, and they had a son whose name was Naosherwan. So one day Naosherwan walks in to where we were staying across the road, and he comes to me and says, where is Baba? And I tell him, Baba is sleeping on the floor in the other room. So he goes in and he comes out again and he says, why is Baba sleeping on the floor? So Mani tells me, why don't you ask Baba? So Naosherwan goes in, spends quite some time. He comes out and I ask him. Mani says that I asked Naosherwan, did you speak to Baba and did he tell you why he was sleeping on the floor? And Naosherwan says, yes, Baba told me, and he leaves. The point that Mani was trying to make over there in this story is that you do not have to be speaking in order to communicate. You do not have to be talking. That Meher Baba could, in silence, communicate with a child of 5 or 6, or with a philosopher, or with a yogi on that same level. He didn't need words to communicate. He could communicate any which way he could. Without the alphabet board or without signs and gestures, he knew how to communicate. So that was the illustration. Then Meher Baba came to Dehradun in 1953 and he stayed for 1 year in Dehradun. But he was constantly in seclusion. Now, on September 7, 1953, which was Rasta's birthday, is when he gave his darshan in Dehradun. So over a period of time that he was there for a year, he would visit. We would go there very often, and he would come to our home very often. Every morning, he would go on his way to Haridwar, Rishikesh. He would stop at 5 o'clock outside our gate. All of us would come to the gate. He would swing his legs from the front where he sat. He would embrace each one of us, kiss us, and then he would go on his way. Every day he would do this. This was a daily thing. So that's how I learned to get up early, early in the morning. And the way we would see it is his car would have the 7-colored flag. So we would instantly know that Meher Baba was coming. So then he would continue to do work over there in these places of contacting the masts and the mad and the Mahatmas and the yogis. Now, my father was a shy man. He was not in those years, he was not a very dynamic person who would actually go out and do things. But one day, Baba gave him an assignment. Baba said that I want you to go and bring in 5 people who were neither rich nor poor, but middle class. But those who would not express their personal financial situation. So my father had a real hard time, because you could find a rich man, you can find a poor man, but how would you find a man they were neither rich nor poor, but did not express themselves? Today we call them middle class, but you don't find people who say these things. So he had a hard time. So there was just 1 week left, Baba's deadline. And he goes to Baba and he says, Baba, they say they're going to come, but they don't come. And so Baba said, I'll give you 1 more week and I'll help you. So my father finally found 5 people. And at the last day, it was on a Friday, that he brought them to Baba. Baba bowed down to each one of them, gave them a blanket, and gave them 100 rupees to each one of them, and they left. So, this is how my father also was brought out in the open to do things. Then on September 7th, 1953, I was telling you, we celebrated Zoroaster's birthday with Meher Baba. So my father used to run a sewing machine company, Singer Sewing Machine Company. So he, my mother, my sister Mahrukh, and myself. My sister's name is also Mahrukh. My wife's name is also Mahrukh. So my sister Mahrukh, who's 5 years older than me, we all went to Baba's house at 101 Rajpur Road. That was the address. That house was rented for Baba during that period. And we went in, and my father had to sit outside because he was not allowed to look at the women mandli. He was put there to repair some machines and so forth that the women needed to be repaired. And the 3 of us went in. So Baba stood, among you put rangoli and you put this chalk. You must have seen, even at the young adult savas, you have them putting those rangoli. So similarly, the Parsis also put it on occasion. So they put it, and then Baba came, stood on it, and then Mera, she put a vermilion on Baba's forehead and a little rice and said, "Happy birthday, Baba," and embraced Baba. And then I was standing there watching and looking at it, and then I turned to Mera and I say, "But why is my birthday not being celebrated?" And Mera said, "Why not?" So Baba stepped aside and I stood on the chalk, and a vermilion was put on my forehead and my birthday was celebrated at the same time. And then we had Rava and Save and so forth. And then Baba asked me my sister used to learn Indian classical music. So she sang a song, and I used to learn tabla at that time. So I played the tabla on the table. And whenever you did something for Baba, he would always give you a gift. So he gave us a little wallet with his photograph in it, a red wallet to my sister and a green wallet to me. And earlier he had given me a kaleidoscope because he had just come back from the United States. He was there in 1952, so he came loaded with a lot of gifts for children. So he gave me a kaleidoscope, which I still have at Beloved Archives. And then he gave me a tortoise that he had brought, a mechanical tortoise. So I used to play. I don't have that tortoise anymore, but I remember that he gave me a tortoise. And he had also brought a duck for my sister, so he gave her a duck. So these were the little gifts that he brought. And then I would sit on Baba's lap and he would ask me to pull out his big finger. And so these were the ways that he brought us closer and closer to him, till he became not only the father and the mother, but he was also the father and mother for us. And that's how I saw him, as the father and mother in one. So in those days, I never saw him as God in human form. I only saw him as somebody I loved and somebody I wanted to be in his presence, even when I was 7 years old. So while in November, Meher Baba left for Mahabaleshwar, and I don't know how others took it, but I took it very badly. So I had a very stormy period when I could not, I wanted to be in his presence. I could not focus on my studies, and so forth. But I had to continue studying, and I did my senior Cambridge, and then went to college. And then when I was doing my graduation, I couldn't bear the separation any longer. So I decided to leave the house, to renounce everything. And I wrote to Baba saying that I was going to come to be with him. And Baba wrote back saying, "Renounce nothing but your present attitude." Letter follows. So then he sent me a lot of letters and a lot of messages, a lot of instructions. So I'll read some of them. And in one message he said, "For spiritual aspirants, renunciation is of help. But those who love the avatar and are under his direct guidance do not have to renounce anything. The lovers of the avatar have simply to obey the avatar's instructions and to love him wholeheartedly." But I was in a very fragile state at that time, and my mother was very worried that I might get drawn away by some guru or mahatma or something like that, that I would be caught in their clutches. So my mother secretly wrote to Baba about my mental state and my state where I was very disturbed, and I used to hit my head against the wall and feel cold when it was hot, and hot it was cold, and so I couldn't get sleep for days, and then I would start writing poetry for Baba, and so I was just completely in a musk-like state. So then Baba wrote to me, sent another message. "Don't be led astray by any Tom, Dick, Harry of a spiritual master. Beware of such cheap experiences and spiritual stunts of spiritual clowns. The world will know who I am when I break my silence. And then you too will realize my infinite love for you and my lovers. but I was not satisfied. So um, I wrote to him saying that I wanted to observe silence and I wanted to fast and so forth. So Baba wrote back to me, to obey the God man is the highest form of worship to God in human form. Obey me implicitly if one day you want to know me as I am. And then he wrote again in the same letter, do not observe prolonged silence. Do not serve yourself by doing so. You who lead a dedicated life in my cause have no need for such discipline. You are close to me and you are very dear to me. I know how you strive to be merged in my love. I want you not to strive for this, strive in inverted commas, but to allow your dear love to flow freely to me in its natural course. Know one most important thing in this spiritual line, and that is that no amount of your striving to reach me could transport you to me. Simplest thing for you to do is to just love me in the most natural way, as a child would love his mother, and carry out anything I, on my own, command you to do, on my own, underline in inverted commas. And then, of course, he sent me instruction, keep cheerful and happy in my love. Now, in these days, we say, don't worry, be happy, and we take this very lightly. But when Baba gave an order, keep cheerful in my love, that's the way it was. So I did not go to Baba. He gave me instructions to continue with my studies, to do my graduation. Of course, I later on did my postgraduate studies in English literature, and those were his instructions. So then, I was invited. There was a small news item that appeared in the papers, and that was the Third World Religions Conference. And I wanted to attend that, knowing fully well that I would be the youngest delegate. This was a very large conference of thousands of people who had come. All the world religions were represented. And it was held at what is known as the Ram Leela grounds, which is the largest grounds in Delhi that accommodates millions of people. So this event was held there. And it was organized by two people, Sant Kirpal Singh, who was a spiritual master who had come twice to see Baba, and Muni Sushil Kumar, who was the head of the Jain religion. But there were two sects of the Jain religion. There was Sudambar and the Digambar, and both were represented. One of them, one sect, they do not wear any clothes, both the men and women. The women just cover themselves with the sari, and the men are totally naked. And the other one, they wear a mask so that no insects would go into their mouth. But they were the organizers. So I sent off my application after Baba gave me permission that I could attend this. So I sent off my application with the 100 rupees fee. And the theme that I opted for was world peace. And the subject that I had offered was the supervening powers of faith in the evolution of world peace. So I was slotted under the peace category. And there were other Baba lovers, like Dr. G.S.N. Murthy and Dr. C.D. Deshmukh, Abdul Majid Khan, Amar Singh Sehgal, and a host of others. There were lots of people. There were Pope's representatives and others, and everybody who was a nobody in the world of religion and mysticism and spirituality was there. And one day earlier, the entire Prime Minister and his cabinet had come to the Ram Leela grounds, and everybody recited prayers for peace and prosperity. And Dr. Amar Singh Sehgal, who was a parliamentarian, went to the organizers and said, What? No prayer for Meher Baba? So they told him that he could pray for Baba, and he stood on the ramparts of Ramlila grounds and recited the Master's prayer. The next day was the day when I had to speak, so on a raised platform. So there were a number of speakers before me, and then my turn came. And when my turn came, I had already prepared my speech. But that morning, Meher Baba had sent me a cable, just to me. I'm with you at the Third World Religions Conference. So I knew that I was in good hands. So I stood up and I gave a talk. I was about to start, and I said, I talked about Zoroaster's message on peace, and Ram's message on peace, and Krishna's message on peace, and Muhammad's message on peace, and Jesus' message on peace, and Buddha's message on peace. And now we have in our midst the Prince of Peace, the King of Peace, Meher Baba. So the moment I said that, two men jumped on me and pulled me, asking me to sit down. And Sant Kripal Singh suddenly turned and told those two men that let the young man speak. I was just 19 years of age at that time, and the youngest delegate at the Third World Religions Conference. But I was also mentored by the secretary of the conference, who introduced me to everyone. His name was Baron Frary von Blomberg. So I stood up, and even though I had been very afraid to speak, I stood in front of the mic and I said, I have uttered the name of Meher Baba, but these two men have asked me to sit down, and they're not allowing me to speak. If you want me to speak, I will speak. And thousands of people shouted, we want Meher Baba, we want Meher Baba. And I continued speaking about Meher Baba. And that was that. And then I wrote, then again that evening I had a meeting with the Zoroastrians, and the head priest of the Zoroastrians, who had come for the occasion, staged a walkout and said he had never been insulted after I uttered Meher Baba's name. So these are the various different events that have happened. So one of the training that Meher Baba was giving me was complete fearlessness. Today I can stand in front of 1 million people and speak about Meher Baba without blinking an eyelid. Totally fearless. He had made me completely fearless. And I'm very grateful to him for that. So I can stand anywhere and share Meher Baba's message, as I expect everybody who has come into Meher Baba's fold to share with others. Without fear, without having the feeling that somebody will laugh at me, or somebody will embarrass me, or feel embarrassed or shamed. Because Meher Baba is nothing to be ashamed of. You are here, as each one of us are here as Meher Baba followers, because of his grace. He has brought about a transformation of consciousness and has given us his grace. And what is his grace? His awakening. The awakening to his love, to being in his presence. That is his awakening. So I wrote to Baba, but he wasn't pleased. And I'll narrate this as the last one of my transformative meetings with Meher Baba. So I write to him, but he wanted to know more. He wanted the detailed account of my visit. So I went to Guru Prasad on May 4th, 1965. And on May 4th, 1965, I came to Pune, came to Guru Prasad, took out my sandals, and walked into this Mandli room and saw Meher Baba sitting bare-bodied above the top. It was 100 degrees temperature, and he was wearing a 3/4 length pajamas, culottes. And I just flew into his arms. I kissed him, he kissed me. I fell at his feet, I kissed his feet, and I sat. And then Iraj turns to me, I saw Iraj, he turns to me and he says, Meher Baba would like to hear everything that you experienced in New Delhi. So I started to narrate. And as I was narrating, he would interrupt me and turn to somebody and say, "Do you love me?" And the person said, "Yes, Baba." Then he would ask me to continue, and he would turn to somebody else, "Do you love me?" And he would say, and ask me to continue. And then at one point he turned to me and while I was narrating, "Do you love me?" And I said, "Yes, Baba." And he wanted me to continue. So I continued. It was a very long narration. And I came to the end of as I was coming to my end of my narration, he turns to somebody and says, "Do you accept me as God?" And the man said, "Yes, Baba." He turns to somebody else and asks the same question. And then I come to the end of my narration and he turns to me and he says, "Do you accept me as God in human form?" And I said, "Absolutely, Baba." And he stretches his hand, comes forward. I put my hand into his. And then Iraj says, "Meher Baba says that he wants you to tell the world that he is God in human form." And this was the mandate he gave me at that moment. I didn't feel the impact at that time, but my life had been transformed at that point. And during the course of the conversation, he had talked about, he asked me at one point, "What did the Parsis ask of you?" And I said, "The Parsis who came to this meeting, they asked me a lot of questions, but there was one question that eluded me." And he said, "What question?" And I asked him. They asked me, "How can Meher Baba say that he's God in human form?" And Meher Baba became solemn and he said, "Naosherwan, you are God in human form. Iraj here is God in human form. Francis and all of you sitting here are God in human form. I am God in human form, but I am conscious of my divinity. It is my job to make each one of you conscious of your divinity. And how do I do that? I give you the gift of conviction." It is this gift of conviction that spurred me into starting the Glow, which he founded. And I started the Glow in 1966. You can use an image of the Glow in your video to show people what the Glow looks like. And this is the 48th year of the Glow. And this is Meher Baba's outreach to the world today. It's the only magazine founded by Meher Baba, which is continuously published for 48 years. And then, but before I went out of the room, after he said that "I want you to tell the world that I'm God in human form," he clapped and out walked Gohar and handed something to him. And this was the medallion with Baba's bas-relief on one side and the mastery and servitude symbol on the other. And gave it to me, as if to seal what he had just said. And as I left the room and as I went home, I realized that Meher Baba wanted me to tell the world that he's God in human form, not to this members of this religion or this group or this sect, but to people of all religions. And how am I going to do that? I have to form something that is within the ken, within the ambit of my capacity and capability. And that's when I formed Beloved Archives. So Beloved Archives is a non-denominational, non-religious archive, completely open access to everybody. It has complete public access. Somebody from the street can walk in and have complete access to over 100,000 documents which have been scanned. Over 8,000 photographs of Meher Baba that have been scanned. Over 200 films that have been digitized. and hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of cassettes that have been converted into MP3s. We also have at Beloved Archives what is known as the Darshan Room, where people come every few weeks and they gather, and we hold. We recently held a children's savas. In a couple of weeks, we are going to have a young adult savas, and in May we had an intensive with one of the resident Mandli from here. One of the resident from here, Dr. Ward Parks, came and gave a 2-day intensive on reincarnation, which was extremely well attended. And now we are distributing those a 4 CD set on reincarnation. So it was and of course with Beloved Archives, which is based in Hamilton, New Jersey, next to Princeton. We have people who are coming in from all faiths, seekers from everywhere, coming to learn more about Meher Baba. We also have a lot of artifacts of Meher Baba. We have Meher Baba's coats, Meher Baba's sandals. We have a large, but there are 3 rare things that we have. We have Baba Jan's hair, and we have Hazrat Baba Jan's hair, and we have the Master's Prayer in original with corrections made by Erich. This Master's Prayer was given in 1953 in Dehradun, and Erich had made corrections and handed it over to my father for typing, and that original copy, which Baba handled, is with us. And there is a coconut that Upasti Maharaj gave to Chanji, and Chanji gave it to his niece Nirgish, and Nirgish gave it to me. So for all these years we've had in our archives. My mother was an archivist of sorts, in the sense that when Meher Baba came to our house, if he had a sip of tea, or he had something to eat in a plate, or he had a toffee or something he ate and he left the wrapper, it would be spirited away and kept away for posterity. So today, Beloved Archives has one of the rarest collection of material on the life, work, and teachings of Meher Baba. And recently, Pete Townsend, the lead guitarist of The Who, donated a large archive to, that's my large archive to the trust, to Beloved Archives. At the very end, I'd like to mention a small little anecdote. January 31st, 1969, Meher Baba dropped his body. I came to the tomb. I saw his body lying in state. There was nobody at the tomb that night when I arrived. Era Jasawala, his assistant secretary, was there, handed me a flashlight, and I went into the tomb. I closed the door and I sat there with Meher Baba's body lying in state. And when I had heard, I had come from Bombay, when I had heard that Meher Baba has dropped his body, the first thought, the nagging thought that came to me was, what will I do without him? What will I do without him? And when I came to the tomb and I sat there, I kept looking at Meher Baba's face, said the Master's Prayer. I took a pledge to write his biography in full. And I was tired, so I put the flashlight aside. I put it on his face, and Meher Baba opened his eyes and looked directly at me. I again moved my flashlight to see if I was seeing things. I put it back, and his eyes were closed. But what that did for me was that the thought that what will I do without him was replaced with, he's always with you. He's always with you. He's always with you. And that is what I would like the viewers of this video to know, that when you remember him, when you think of him, or when you say his name, he's always with you. But what does it mean to him always with you? He wants you to share his name with people whom you meet, your mothers, your fathers, your sisters, your brothers, your lovers, your husbands, your wives, with everybody, people in your office, with everybody. You must share his name. Come up with a way of sharing his name. That's very important. And that's very, very vital. It's your right, but it's also your duty to share his name. And that's not called conversion or proselytizing. That is simply sharing a beautiful experience of conviction that you've had with him. And then it's between the one whom you've shared the name with and Meher Baba to put them on the spiritual path. That is where your job ends. So what you need to remember is to love him with all your heart, remember him, and surrender to him totally and completely. And what does it mean to surrender? Is to rely wholly and solely on him. Avtar Meher Baba ki jai.